Thank you so much, everyone, either in person or digitally, joining us tonight. We have Emery Lee joining conversation with Jonny Garza Villa. Let's give him a big round of applause. Emery is an author and artist whose love for chaotic and morally gray characters started at a young age, drawing inspiration from Eastern media, pop punk music, and personal life experience. Your work seeks to explore the intersections of life and identity in fun, heartfelt, inventive ways. In Ear Time, you'll most likely find them marathoning anime or snuggling cute dogs. I love that one. Jonny is a product of the great state of Texas, born and raised along the Gulf Coast and currently residing in San Antonio. Their debut novel is 1,500 Miles from the Sun, which unfortunately it's on back order today, but Jonny will have some signed book plates for us for anyone who wants to order the book and get that book plate afterward. Their next novel is Ander and Santi Were Here, expected sometime in 2023. As a reminder, if anyone hasn't yet bought the book, you can get that definitely through us. For either Emery Lee or Jonny, right now you can get signed and or personalized. I'm going to go ahead and take it away. If you have any questions, we'll get them later in the event.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonny Garza Villa, and I have the honor of being here with my nemesis, Emery Lee, to talk about his new book, Cafe con Lychee, and how amazing it is. I had the opportunity to read it pretty early on and say some really nice words about it, and I'm excited to talk about it with him, and if you'll have any questions, for you all to participate in that conversation as well. So I think the first question I really wanted to ask is, this is now your second book, and I just wanted, like, what does it feel like now as someone who is not yet at second book out yet? Like, what are we feeling? What's the vibes happening? What's going on internally?
Well, first, I just want to say, you can tell that it was desperate times for me because I had my arch nemesis blurb my book. I'm just kidding. I think it's really great because the second book is basically all of the fun and excitement of the first book, but without, like, the overwhelming terror. So you already know that, like, there are people who are interested in, like, what you have to say. You already know that there are, like, people who are gonna, like, show up to your events and, like, buy copies of your book. So you get past a little bit of that fear, but, like, I'm here in person, so that's pretty cool.
I love that. And speaking more so specifically to Cafe con Lychee, can you describe, like, the journey it was from, like, having this idea of this rivals to lovers food sort of situation in school? Like, where did this idea come from?
So, like, the initial idea was, like, one day I was eating, like pastries, and, like, I was like, oh my god, why don't I write, like, a book about, like, some of this food that I'm, like, so obsessed with eating. And I tweeted about it, and everyone was like, oh my god, yeah, you should write it. And I was like, oh, this was a shit post. This is not supposed to be taken seriously. But people kept asking me to write it, so I was like, okay, fine, I'll write it. And so it just kind of became, like, this, like, kind of, like, balancing between, like, two different worlds for me, like, between being, like, Puerto Rican and, like, kind of, like, the food that goes into that, and, like, the family and the culture and that kind of stuff, and then also with being Asian American and, like, all of those kind of, like, cultural elements and that kind of food, and then just kind of, like, balancing those two sides, like, and creating characters that can, like, embody, like, the different experiences that would go along with each one.
Yeah, and I think I really got that energy in reading the book of just, like, the culture that's melded in this story, with your identities in there, and the food, of course. And I just love any sort of, like, cultural tie into food, and balancing that with the relationship of Theo and Gabby, the main characters, and their own arcs in there. It's a lot to just, like, really enjoy in that book. And I think, speaking to Gabby and Theo specifically, I personally think you might have created a new relationship dynamic in, like, the grumpy boy / useless boy ship that is Theo and Gabby. And, like, I would love if you would talk a little bit about, like, because even in Meet Cute Diary, you really have this way of using tropes and thought like that seems very formulaic, but not, like, in a scientific sense, almost in a, like, it's so easy to see this on Netflix sort of sense. And so I would just really love to pick your mind on, like, how you incorporate tropes, like, where that comes into play in planning story. and all of that.
So I remember when I was maybe like in like early college, like high school, I went to an event with Maggie Stiefvater, author of the Raven Cycle, and something she said was like the best way to like craft a character is to start with like a stereotype or an archetype and then make them human. And I think that that's something that I've kind of started to do with my books. I'll kind of start with just like this idea or like usually just like a trope that I'm like, oh my God, this one's so funny or this one's so cool. And then as you start to like blend that in with like the real characters and the real people that you're trying to like build up in the story, you start to like almost like branch out and develop like new elements. For me personally, like I don't believe in like characters who are like high functioning and like capable. So like essentially I always need to like nerf my characters with something that like makes them like barely functioning. And so like in Gabby's case, like he's so afraid of like being perceived a certain way that he can't function. And Theo is like, you know, could be capable, but he's so angry that he's just like caught up in this like, you know, this frustration. And so he's not really getting anywhere. And so it kind of became this like, you know, this build up from like, okay, well they're enemies, so I need them to be like vaguely opposites, but also like, you know, what other elements can I throw in there? I'm like, well, I love the grumpy and like sunshine trope. And then as I threw that in there, it became, you know, the accidentally grumpy and the like closeted sunshine. And it just kind of created this whole new thing. So I feel like that's just kind of how like tropes tend to like build in a story for me.
I love that. As someone who just like is kind of vibing the entire time I draft, like, and really has no idea what I'm doing, that's a process I will never use, but also very much respect. And still sticking on these two, I just like, while the relationship between Theo and Gabby is at the forefront of the story, you've really written two very distinct characters with their own struggles and feelings about their lives that you kind of like spoke about already, and Theo feeling like he's not really living up to his family's expectations and his opinions about his older sibling being a constant thing in his mind, and Gabby's dancing and being closeted and both having parents with struggling restaurants. So like what really was like the process of bringing these two and like really forming this is their identity, this is their hopes and dreams, and how they interact with each other and the world?
Like I think I tend to start with like really surface things when I create a character. Like it's kind of like, what kind of energy would they have? What like music do they listen to? What vibes are they giving off? Like, and it's kind of just like this image of like with Theo, like I kind of knew that I wanted him to be not an Asian stereotype was basically what I started with. I was like, okay, he's gonna be this Asian kid and he's gonna have like all this Asian food and like all this kind of stuff. But I don't want him to be an Asian stereotype. So I was like, okay, well, what are the things that are like typically stereotypical? Like really smart and like really well behaved. And I was like, okay, he's gonna be the opposite of both of those things. And like as like I went from there, it became a lot of like, okay, well, I mean, I was not very well behaved. So, like, what were like some experiences that I had? What were some conflicts I had with my own family? What were some like, you know, what were things that like people expected of me that I failed at? And like, how did those things ultimately become strengths for me? And so that's kind of where I started with like the whole like building up the depth of his character is just kind of like taking things that like felt real to me and then making stuff up that like cushioned it all and made it like feel cohesive. And then for Gabby, it was a lot of like, you know, his character is a lot of like fear. And a lot of like, you know, I can't get outed, this kind of stuff. But then it was like, okay, well, what would be things that would make him be afraid of being outed? I was like, well, what if he was just really, really gay? Like just in like every way I could think of. So I was like, okay, well, you know, he only hangs out with girls. Like, you know, he loves ballet and like just making him like really flamboyant and like really into these things that are like so often stigmatized, like especially like in like the next communities where it's kind of like, you know, this expectation for men to be super masculine and like. And so it was kind of like building up like what exactly would be causing these fears, what would be the root of these fears, and like what causes the biggest conflict for him. And then as I fleshed that out, it was kind of like, okay, now how can he and Theo kind of like balance each other and like ricochet off of each other? And so I'm like, okay, well, if all of Gabby's strengths are Theo's weaknesses and like vice versa, this is going to be like the perfect enemies cocktail. So it was basically like a lot of just building off these little elements. And then once you have them all together, it's like baking. You throw all the ingredients together, you stick it in the oven, and you like cross your fingers and hope it works. And like, so that was kind of where it went. It was just kind of like, okay, well, now they're here, they're in the oven, and hopefully the story works out. And like, fortunately for me, it did.
Yeah, I think it was super successful in just creating these realistic characters and even between both of them, seeing parts of myself as a teenager, like in Theo and also in Gabby, and the ways I'm like a little bit of both of them, even still, um, and just how you really created this really perfect earth sign, water sign couple too, was just an accomplishment, I think. Um, and like speaking to their romance in particular, and just maybe like romance in general, I would love to know from you, what do you think makes a good romance story? And are there any specific things in romances that you particularly love or even like implementing in your own stories?
Yeah, so like, I mean, I obviously have strong opinions about romance because I write a lot of it, but I also like just read a lot of it. And I think like my opinion in terms of like what makes a good romance, like I feel like there's like two key elements. Like one is the characters have to like complement and also contradict each other in certain ways. If you have characters who are too similar or characters who are too different, like it doesn't work. But the other thing, I think this is like a big thing that a lot of people who like try to write stories that have romance in them but don't really read a lot and write a lot of romance tend to fall into is like they have to have romantic tension, and like that tension, I think sometimes people kind of think, oh, like romantic tension, that just means they think each other are attractive. And it's like, no. Like there's so much more to like you want them to essentially not be able to get the other person out of their head. And so that's why one of the reasons I love Enemies to Lovers so much is because it starts with, it doesn't have to start with, oh my God, he's so cute, I love him. It can start with, oh my God, I hate him so much. All I can think about is how much I hate him. And so I think when you're like building up a romance, it's really important to make it so that the characters are really thinking about each other even when the other is not around. And it's like, and I love like when you're writing, especially like with that hate to love, when you have that gradual progression from, oh my God, I hate him, to, oh my God, I hate him, but he's also kind of cute, to, oh my God, he's really cute, and that makes me hate him even more. And now you have like this really like this really strong like romantic tension between them that really just like magnetizes the two characters together. And I think that's probably like my absolute favorite thing to do in a romance is just really have those characters like just like frustrated by how much they think about the other character.
Yeah, I think like that sort of like kind of obsessiveness is like a really fun quality to write. I think especially in YA, and like being young and kind of sensing that, and like the feeling of this one particular person who notices you for whatever reason, good or bad, and that just becomes like your entire personality. I think is just so like a YA romance thing in particular, something I love to read and write. It's so chaotic, I think, most of the time. And now, going more into just the story itself, I, as a fellow proud author of a gay soccer book, wanted to ask you, now a writer of a gay soccer book, what do you think it is about soccer that is just so gay?
I mean, for one thing, I feel like it's the fact that it's like so not American. Like Americans don't really do soccer that much, and I feel like Americans are so homophobic, and it almost just like inherently, I feel like there's something hand in hand in there. But I think like, so the thing is like, I feel like sports in general, right? Like we think of them as like, I don't know, like very like popular people, like sometimes hyper masculine like concepts, but like they're really not when you think about it. Like you have like a whole bunch of people generally of the same gender changing together and like in very close proximity to each other in ways that can be, interesting. And so I think like when you think about like sports teams in general, there's already a lot of room for like romantic tension in like almost any like sports environment. But I think that soccer is one where like it's not as like, and again, I think it's just because it's not American, is that it's not expected to be as hyper masculinized as like, football or like basketball sometimes, even like baseball sometimes. You're like, okay. Like I feel like there's a little more like fluidity there. I also feel like it's really easy to write a story where like everyone is like, chasing after the ball and maybe two guys sneak off into the corner and then, they're doing something else and, you don't really notice because they're just following the ball and it's on the other side of the field. And like, I feel like, I just feel like there's a lot of room in soccer. I feel like there's a lot of room, especially because, basketball, there's only 10 people on the court at any time, right? But like soccer, it's a little more distracting, you can get away with a lot more. So I just feel like that is like, it has so much more room for some of these. I guess football has room for some good stuff too. But yeah, right. I think we're gonna need that next.
That's a great answer. Very different from me and just the feelings I get every single World Cup. Really being what prompted me to write a gay soccer book. Um, and I really wanted to go back and speak on like the cultural perspectives of this book. Like Meet Cute Diary had a little bit of it in there, but with Cafe con Lychee, culture plays a much bigger part of the story, and it does so in my favorite way. It centers food. And so, were there any particular moments of writing those, in specific, those food scenes that brought you a lot of joy from just like a cultural writing perspective?
So like I have a thing like with every book that I write, I very much have like a goal in mind, and that goal is not necessarily like the plot or anything like that. But it's just something that I really want to like bring out as I'm going through the story. Like for me, Q Diary, it was all about like, you know, trans happiness. Like that was the focus, that was the goal. And so I didn't bring a lot of culture into it because I didn't want to like delve into like the struggles of culture and that kind of stuff. But with Cafe con Lychee, it was like my chance to be like, okay, you know, like I want to talk about like, you know, the culture, the food, like that kind of stuff. But like I really wanted to bring in like the nuance of like, you know, my experiences like with my own cultures and like being a person of color. Like I think sometimes people think of like being a person of color and being queer as like being at odds, and it's like in some ways it is, but it's also really not. But like food, I feel like becomes this thing that ties you to like your parents, your ancestors, your grandparents. But like at the same time, when you're like struggling with that friction between like you and like your parents and your grandparents, your ancestors, you have this like, am I allowed to enjoy this? Am I allowed to embrace this? Am I allowed to like really like experience this? Like, because is it still mine? Am I still allowed to keep it as my own? And so I think like the big thing that came in with the food was just Theo and Gabby basically saying like, we're gonna do this together, like this thing that like, you know, is like our culture, like I'm gonna share it with you. And I feel like to take something like a recipe and like share it with someone else is a really intimate thing, especially when it's something so closely tied to your culture and like your family. And so they were basically saying like, look, even if our parents aren't supporting everything we're doing, even if they don't support like us being together and us working together because they're enemies, like I'm still choosing to share this with you. And so I have like a scene in the book, and I'm not gonna like spoil it, but it's like the scene where like the book gets its name. And like I feel like in that moment, it's like the moment that Theo and Gabby realize that they're kind of like on the same wavelength here. And it's just like this idea of fusing two different sides of my culture and like bringing them together, but also just allowing like this mixture of foods to kind of showcase the way that like these two characters are taking charge of their own lives and saying like, this is mine. Like you can't take my culture from me, and I can give it to whoever I want. Like even if like other people disagree with it, like this is something that I have and that I can share with like this person that I care about. And so I feel like that was like a very big like moment.
I think I particularly enjoy talking about like the fact that these things are that come from like our ancestry, our parents, our grandparents, especially as BIPOC people, children of immigrants. We have like these recipes that come from our familiarities, from our ethnicities, from our nationalities, and I think it really like showed something extra special in the way that both of them came together and said, I'm going to bring what I have and you bring what you have, and let's put it together into something even better, in a way that feels like young adult and also like children of immigrancy, and also just like living in America and like figuring yourself out as like a diaspora child, and figuring yourself out as a diaspora child among a lot of other diaspora kids from a lot of different places, and how that eventually looks as not necessarily like separate things, but just a bunch of things that are kind of inspired by each other. And I think that like in that way they too kind of got inspired by each other after they started like really being able to be around each other. And so like the book, and by like, and a lot of it is like about these two trying to raise money by selling things at school. And I wanted to ask if the two of us were going to sell something at some fictional high school, because they're both high schoolers, that melded our backgrounds together. What do you think we would sell? What would it be?
Okay, so keeping in mind that this is purely for the novelty and to catch people's attention, because if I actually had to try it, I'd probably throw up. Uh, I think it would be boba takis. Yeah.
I know. I'm trying to like wrap my head around that.
Disgusting. I mean, everything about
And yeah, I don't even know where to begin with that. Is the boba made of Takis, or is like the tea Takis flavored?
I was
Like-
thinking almost like I was thinking almost like we're like it's like Takis and then like boba as like the topping almost. So like I guess you would like make like a Taki smoothie or something and put like boba in it, or like it would be absolutely vile. Like I'm disgusted just even like getting into like the details of it.
I mean, like, you put some mango in there, I would try it. Honestly, some mango or like some pineapple and like maybe a little bit of tahini. Like, I would try it. I'll be honest. Maybe I am. And I wanted to ask you, just thinking about both Theo and Gabby. Theo, the kind of like good at everything, but also kind of just shitting in his own world sort of situation, and Gabby shitting in all the worlds kind of situation, but just doing his best. Who do you think you were more of in high school, like a Gabby or a Theo?
Oh yeah, no. I was definitely a Theo. I was the angry child. Like you've seen my music taste. Yeah, no. I was definitely not. I did not cry like Gabby. I was not the soft one.
That makes perfect sense. I think I was more of a Theo too. Definitely with like a lot of Gabby fears, but like not emotionally processing any of it. So closer to like Theo and just like brick walling yourself constantly. And I love that for us. We need more Theos in this world, I think. But yeah, that for right now I think is all the questions I had. If we have any audience questions, we have one here front. Do you like one? Oh, never mind. I'll repeat the question into this, and then so that people online can also hear the question. Same. Long time no see.
So, in your comment about soccer, I was like, maybe I should stop here.
We would have respected you for it.
But what? Why? Wait, what?
Oh, the little. I think it's like a dessert item. They just yeah. The question was about cover design. What is that? What is that? On Gabby's head, you have this like, it. I don't know what that is. Is it a cookie?
Look, I hate when people ask me like to name things. I'm like, those things like those little.
You know, yeah, I mean, there's a picture. There's a picture of it right there.
I don't know what anything's called.
Okay. Anyways,
It looks like a steam bun. It looks like a steam bun.
it could be a steam bun. Yeah. So the steam bun,
Not like
like it.
oh no, I think it's
I almost think it looks like the thing whenever you have like that creamy frosting sort of thing, and then you bake it.
oh no, I was thinking.
Meringue.
know,
Thank you.
I think
I was talking about a meringue.
Do y'all know the little? So they're almost like they almost look like a sweet snuggling, but it's not soup inside. It's like dessert cake.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think it's something like
Okay.
that. I don't know
Yeah.
what it's called. I don't know.
So the item on Gabby's hair was not placed there purposefully, and we do not know what it is. I think that
like we could do like a debate about that.
You know, yeah, we like hashtag find out what's on Gabby's head. I think is what we need to get trending.
Virtual question. How much editing and work did it take to turn CCL from a meme post to a work you could be proud of?
That's an incredible question.
This is a good question. Actually, a lot less than you would think. So like, it actually was a very. it was a little like weird for me because I wrote it like it's the book sold before I finished writing it. So like instead of doing like my full usual process where like I'll write a book and then like revise it a couple times before anyone sees it, the first draft that I sent out was actually like my first draft, and it was kind of weird. But I think we only did like I think I want to say it was maybe like 2.5 drafts. Like it wasn't actually a lot. And I think it just worked out really well because I was like I had already sold Meet Cute Diary and everything, so I was kind of just like following the formula, like this is how you do a rom-com, and then just like inserting the characters into it. But yeah, it was kind of like it was a weird situation because my editor was involved with it from the beginning, so I don't think I needed to do as much like soul searching to get somewhere. Like she kind of already knew what needed to be done, like it's like I sent her the first draft. So
Do we have? Yeah, go ahead. So I have a book out next year called Under Something We're Here. That one right there. That comes out April 11th, 2023. That we are in the process of making as pretty and perfect as possible for everyone. And I turned in a full manuscript for something I sold earlier this year. That hasn't been announced yet. But yeah, if you like Rivals to Lovers, you'll like this. And if you like Mexican stuff, you'll like, yeah. It's like a book about grief, but also about mariachi and a boy you kissed 8 months ago and now have to hate. But yeah.
I love that. So I mean, for me, it's a little like my stuff is kind of like all messy, like up in the air at the moment. I have an anthology out at the end of the month called All Signs Point TS, and it's an astrology romance anthology. So I have a story in that. And I also have a story in Transmogrify, which is a trans magic anthology that comes out next year. And then as for like my novels, I don't know how much I can really talk about anything because it's all like, not announced and like ready to go. But basically I'm working on a enemies to lovers, and I mean like real enemies to lovers, like it starts with them like sword fighting. Like enemies to lovers, like contemporary fantasy with a lot of like Asian mythology and that kind of stuff. And then I'm also working on a Bahamian mythology middle grade. So
Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, the first one was about our future wedding projects. This one is about how our writing has changed between pre-pandemic to in the pandemic and now. Do you want to go first? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I wrote a lot of books during the pandemic because, so you know how like at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was like, this isn't going to take that long. And like, oh my God, wouldn't it be so cool if someone came out of this writing a book? And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be that person who wrote a book during the pandemic. And so like, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. So I sat down in like 2 weeks and like wrote a book, and I was like, yeah. And then I was like, now I still have more writing energy. So then I just kept writing books. So I wrote, I want to say something like 7 or 8 pandemic books. And so my writing has changed a lot during the pandemic because I wrote so much that I got a lot better. But I think like in general, like I feel like pre-pandemic, I had a lot of like, one, I was a little more inclined towards contemporary stuff because it just felt lighter and easier to write. And I did an interview during the pandemic that I kind of talked about like, I feel like since COVID first arrived, it has felt like the real world is a dystopian, and like fantasy is like the only place where I feel like things are light anymore, which is wild because it's so opposite to how it used to feel. And so lately I've been writing a lot more fantasy. I've been writing a lot more like graphic violence and a lot more like mythology type stuff because I did a lot of like mythological like exploration and reading during the pandemic. And then I also find that like before, when I used to write like a darker story, like a fantasy or like a sci-fi or a horror, I would kill everybody, and I would just take great pride in mass murdering every character. I feel like people are like, oh, that's cool, concerning. Yeah, it really is, but whatever. But like, I feel like since COVID has happened, I'm like, everything's a little morbid. Like, I don't necessarily want to kill everybody. Maybe I'll just kill like 2 people, and then we can like call it a day. So I have a lot more like, I feel like, happier moments, and I also have a lot more humor. I feel like even like the serious moments, I've been kind of like interspersing humor throughout. I think that's just kind of a coping mechanism, so I don't know if that'll ever go away, but for now I kind of like it.
For me, I don't know, like, now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I only started writing at the very end of 2018, so I feel like at this point I've been an author longer in a pandemic than not in a pandemic. And because of the pandemic, well, also because of just living in Texas is a little cheaper than here, I was able to, I was able to like be like a San Antonio comfortable with my book advance and like able to go into just writing full time rather than being where I was working. That was super like anxiety inducing and like panic attack inducing being there during a pandemic. So it allowed me just to like focus on my writing in general, which I think allowed me to really just focus on what I was writing and the stories that I really want to tell. I started writing Under Something We're Here at the beginning of 2020. I had the idea back in like 2019. I just didn't know what I was doing. And I really got serious about it whenever American Dirt came out, which also happened in 2020, like added to like all the other things that happened in 2020. So like I had started writing it then and then really was able to just put all of my time and energy into it when the pandemic like really came and I was just stuck at my house. But so many things about that story, I think, were inspired by the pandemic. That was also the summer that I spent at like Black Lives Matter rallies every single week. And when my favorite taqueria caught fire right before the pandemic, and then I couldn't go to it because of the pandemic, but also because it burned down. And so like I was missing like that place and like really just wanted to like put all of and being stuck in my apartment all by myself. Like all of these things I think really informed what that book turned out to be. And then just really deciding like how exactly I wanted to write afterwards and what those stories are going to look like. And I think they've really maintained the same trajectory as I started out with, but I can see myself becoming a lot more intelligent about how I write. And I think a lot of it's because I had that time to really reflect on the things I learned from my debut rather than spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week working and having one day to write and really reflect on that. So I think I probably moved a lot faster in my own knowledge of writing because of the pandemic than I would have beforehand.
I just want to say I'm sorry I brought you all here for a rom-com and then spent like 5 minutes talking about murder.
Chanel Online asks, will you ever create character art like bookmarks and more stickers?
Yeah, I think both of us really like you can look forward to those sort of things. Well, it's your
I already have stuff like on my website. I have like a little web store that has like some stuff on there. I'm working on like upgrading it so that I can do more of like the small stuff that's like really like fun to have. But there's just so many like legal issues at the moment. So like once all of that is like organized, like just like the business of selling stuff, I'll have like a bunch of other stuff. But I definitely have like art and stuff like pretty much ready to go, like whenever I can actually like put it up there.
I think even like within pre-order campaigns specifically, like you have, I think just like
my pre-order campaign is still open. So if you are buying the book sometime this week, you can submit it like at any point. So like if you want to buy it from Mysterious Galaxy, and you just want to just upload any proof of purchase, and you can get all the stuff that's like on my website. Just go to my website, emeryleebooks.com, and it has like all of that info.
Yeah, and I think particularly for people who are interested in like character art of specifically Cafe Con Leche, get the book and send in your receipt. Like Emery's got a thing on pre-order stuff that like literally no other author is doing. So yeah, like if that's your thing, go and get the receipt.
Thank you, Chanel. Another online question. Kayla asks, for both authors, what's your favorite soccer team?
The Mexico national team.
I've never had favorite sports teams. I just like tune in and like check out what's going on. Like I'm not really like I can't say I'm sports fandom.
Any other questions from the audience? Then one question for the store. Was there anything in Cafe con Leche that was cut out that you wish made it into the final draft?
I don't think so. I don't usually, my stuff doesn't usually get trimmed a whole lot. It's usually like adding more stuff, I feel like. So I don't think there's anything that was cut. I will say there is a project that I was kind of working on that's been temporarily shelved that explores one of the characters in Cafe con Leche a lot more than they were explored in the book. And so I don't know if I will ever come back to that. So assuming that I don't come back to it, that was something that I feel like I wish had probably been touched on a little bit more. If I do come back to it, though, then there'll be a new book that will showcase those things that were cut. So.
All right. Unless there's any other questions from the audience. Yes, DJ.
Ooh, what am I reading? I just finished Out of the Blue by Jason June, which comes out later this month. Incredible. If you love Jason June's writing style, it's really just humorous and chaotic and so gay. I also am going to start reading. Oh my God, what is? Hold on, I'm gonna pull up my book. Don't no one look at this. I have a couple of like arcs that I'm reading. That's like a cool thing about being an author, that you just get to like read stuff before it is like a thing. I have the Sunbearer Trials. That one's probably going to take priority. I have some blurbs I need to send in, but if I can read that one fast, that one's going to be the first one that I read. Probably the minute I'm back at an airport.
Yeah, that one's super high on my list too because I've been meaning to get to it and I haven't. I'm currently. Well, the last book I read was Under and Santi, which is literally Johnny's book. Because it was honestly one of the best contemporary books I've ever read. I know, and I hate to have to say that because you're my nemesis, but it honestly was. So I have to be honest here. And currently I'm reading Zachary Ying and the Dragon Emperor, I think is what it's called. Yes. Oh my God. Okay. So like I have to say Sharon is one of my favorite writers. Like their writing is so good. And like, not only like they're so knowledgeable about everything they write about, like to have that much knowledge about a topic is so impressive, but then the way that they string it together in a way that's like not at all judgmental and fully welcomes you in on their knowledge without ever being condescending. Brilliant. And they're actually doing an event here on like Sunday or something, and I'm so excited because like yes, I love everything they write.
We're very
Brilliant.
happy you mentioned that. Yes, Sunday at 2:30.
I will be back. I will be
back. Mysterious Galaxy, Sunday 2:30. In conversation with Kirsten White.
I have like one more thing. So and I would love like y'all's participation in this too, just to see where we are as a group. I have a trope, this or that I would love to do with you. Because again, I just think you're really great with tropes, and I think this would be fun to see what you think of them. So I'm just gonna do two. You just tell me which one you like better. Okay, found family or soulmates?
Found family.
What about you? Are we team found family here? Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I'm gonna know which one yours is on here. Enemies to friends to lovers or best friends to lovers?
Enemies. Oh my God.
This is where we diverge.
Yeah, I know.
Do we have any enemies lovers here? Oh, like half and half. Okay, cool. I love that. There's.
Okay, but like, listen, I love it. It's even better if they were childhood friends, but then they're enemies, and then yes. Exactly.
And then back to friends, and then to lovers. Yeah. Okay, a sunshine main character or a sarcastic main character?
Sarcastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Fluff or angst? We'll say to read.
To read? I'm gonna say fluff. I would rather write angst. but I don't know. I could only occasionally. It depends on my mood because I love a good angsty book, but like my mental health is fragile, and sometimes I just can't handle it.
Yeah, I think I'm the opposite. I love writing fluff, but I would much rather read angst. Mental health be damned, really. If I have to spend the whole next day in my bed just listening to the Neighborhoods album from 2013, then that's what I'm going to do. Let's see. Fake relationships or secret relationships?
Secret relationships.
I think so too. What do we think here? Secret or fake? Fake. Fake. Let's see. Platonic soulmate or love triangle.
Does the love triangle end in polyamory?
Absolutely, it does.
Love triangle.
Those are both so incredibly valid. A main character that ends in a polyamorous love triangle with a platonic soulmate on the side.
That's literally the book that I'm trying to get out to y'all. So
that we need more of. I love this one. Okay, accidental sleepy confessions or accidental drunk confessions.
Drunk. There's just an added. I feel like sleepy is like but like drunk is hilarious. That shit is so messy. I love that. I live for the chaos.
As someone who wrote an accidental drunk confession as their inciting incident, yeah. But sleepy ones can be really cute. Like, yeah, it's the time that one has a specific place, but I feel like drunk confessions is like a universal thing. If it's anywhere. A mentor protecting the student or a student protecting the mentor?
Student protecting the mentor. There's something I love more than like when someone who is like supposed to be like the weaker one has to like protect the stronger one. Beautiful.
A love at first sight story or a get back together story?
Get back together. I'm actually like second chance romance is actually one of my top like romantic tropes. Yeah, because I was trying to figure out why I'm like love it so much, and I was explaining it to like my roommate. I'm like, I just love stories where they have history. So like childhood friends, like enemies to lovers, where they have that history, or like second chance romance where it's like they once thought they knew each other and now they don't. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I am a love at first sight sort of person. But I do love when you get that background. I found that even helpful in writing like a rivals to lovers story. Like whenever I created some background for my characters, I was like, wow, this actually makes sense now. I had no idea what I was doing until I gave them a prequel. Let's see. What about fire forged friends or childhood friends?
That's hard because I love trauma. I went with fire forged friends. Yeah.
That one is so difficult, honestly.
I know.
Yeah.
I want the childhood ones that were forged.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like,
Giving us like the Song of Achilles moment. Yeah, I think those are all the ones that I had. If we have any more questions that were thought of in those 5 minutes, we'll take them. If not,
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being in here in person or virtually. Let's all give it a round of applause for Emery and Jonny. And as a reminder, especially for those who are tuning in virtually, you can still get a signed copy of either Meet Cute Diary or the new novel, Cafe Con Lychee, while supplies last. We're going to go ahead and end the broadcast and begin the signing line for everyone who is in store. Thank you. Goodbye.